Hey everybody, it is Thursday, September 18th, otherwise known as National Cheeseburger Day, according to the Googles. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to, Jill. Go get yourself a cheeseburger today.
You know who needs a cheeseburger? You, Moshe. You did what? How many interviews yesterday? 3, 4?
I'm doing 4 in 24 hours, 3 alone on Wednesday. Really stacked them up. I don't know how this came together, but somehow like everyone got scheduled on this day. So yesterday, recorded 3 podcasts, interviews that will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks on this feed. So look out for them. And it's a little bit of something for everybody, Jill. So yesterday, the first one that'll be out today is Jeff Ross, the roast master comedian. You might know him from the Tom Brady roast, all the various roasts through the years. He has a one-man show on Broadway. Alex and I got to see it recently, where he's actually like, I told him yesterday, I was like, there's a mushy side to you, Jeff Ross. You're not just the insult comic, but like there's a softer side that almost made me cry at various moments. He's like, yeah, I do. I have that side. So anyway, Jeff Ross, it's fascinating. We talk about comedy. We talk about his show. We talk about his life and his recent fight with colon cancer as well. So it gets serious a moment. So Jeff Ross, that's out. Also spoke to yesterday the head strategist over at Circle, the stablecoin company. And we just dive into crypto. So if you're looking for like a lesson in understanding crypto and stablecoins, which was the subject of the Genius Act we talked about earlier this year, Dante Disparte, that interview is coming up. And then something very different from those two topics, Alyssa Campbell. She's a parenting expert. She has a new book out, very geared towards, well, Jill, you'd be very interested in this book, 5 to 12-year-olds. So too old for toddler tantrums, too young for teenage drama, the in-between challenge phase. So spoke to her yesterday as well. So that'll be rolling out here in the coming weeks. She has a new book out. And then, Jill, this morning, I am talking to Yossi Cohen, the former head of the Israeli Mossad, was involved in a lot. He talks about some of it in his new book. So we got the former head of Israeli Mossad. So again, a lot of interviews coming out in addition to the daily podcast on this feed. And remember, if you're a premium member, Mo News Premium, you guys get the podcast first. You get the interviews first. You get special exclusive extras as well as my download on all of them. So make sure to join Mo News Premium for first dibs on all those conversations. Mo.news/premium.
Moshe, every one of those interviews is up my alley.
Chill. I hope you have 4 hours available for that 4 hours of conversation. No, I think they're mostly between like 30 and 45 minutes, but that's good to hear because, Jill, I was hoping that at least between one of those 4, like there's something for everyone, but all of the above is also an option. So I'm glad you went with either.
But Moshe, when you look at the demographics in our audience, I'm it.
Listen, if you're interested in parenting, comedy, crypto, and foreign intelligence scoops, you might be like Jill, and so be prepared to make some time available for all these podcasts.
All right, but now for what everyone came here for, the news. Let's get to the headlines, starting with the economy. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates for the first time in President Trump's second term. The impact on everything from mortgage rates to credit cards, and why it is not all good news.
Yeah, lowering the rates means they're concerned about aspects of the economy. We'll talk about it.
On Capitol Hill, takeaways from the recently fired CDC director's Senate testimony and why she says that we should expect changes to the vaccine schedule for kids.
ABC is pulling Jimmy Kimmel off the air indefinitely for comments he made about Charlie Kirk. After a lot of FCC pressure, we'll tell you what's behind that move and what it means.
Overseas, President Trump and the First Lady are in the UK for their second state visit, a trip filled with pomp and circumstance.
We'll talk about the big state dinner they had last night, what was on the menu.
And why they might be trying to butter Trump up, no pun intended.
With literal butter. Literal butter at the table last night.
In related news, a Spirit Airlines pilot was scolded for flying too close to Air Force One. The cockpit audio. In Afghanistan, the situation for women continues to get worse under the Taliban, which just banned Wi-Fi in one province. We'll tell you why. The 80s is back, at least when it comes to drugs. America is in the middle of a cocaine resurgence. What's that about? And in entertainment news, the Summer I Turned Pretty series may be over, but Amazon says they're going to make a movie.
Jill wanted to lead the podcast with this story.
Maybe I did.
Jill's about to go rogue and do the whole podcast on The Summer I Turned Pretty.
Moshe, my friend Danae, who listens to this podcast religiously, told me I might be losing some street cred by constantly talking about the summer I turned pretty. So this potentially may be the last podcast episode where I discuss it.
Thank you, Danae.
And Moshe has on this day in history.
Your clue today, don't tell me not to live. Just sit and putta. Said with like a thick Brooklyn accent, Jill.
I can tell.
Don't tell me not to live. Just sit and putta.
I did not know it before, Moshe, but I think I got it.
Yes, I think I just gave it away with my second rendition.
Okay, starting with the economy, the Federal Reserve on Wednesday approved a widely anticipated interest rate cut and signaled that 2 more rate cuts could be coming before the end of the year. Even though inflation is still higher than the Fed wants, it's about 3% compared to a 2% target. There are increasing concerns about the health of the job market. So the vote was 11-1. That is less dissent than a lot of analysts were expecting, especially given the recent drama at the Fed, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The only person who voted against the quarter-point cut was the Fed governor just appointed by President Trump, Stephen Miron. He wanted an even bigger cut, a 0.5-point cut. The 2 other Fed governors appointed by Trump, Michelle Bowman and Christopher Waller, they both voted for the quarter-point reduction. As we've been reporting, Trump has been pushing the Fed all summer to cut rates. He wants the rate cuts quick. He wants the Fed to be aggressive. And this is seen as a way to spur economic growth. We've gotten a bunch of very weak jobs reports recently, and that appears to have done the trick, convincing the Fed that they needed to cut rates. At his news conference after the meeting, Fed Chair Jerome Powell talked about his concern with the labor market. He said job gains have slowed. He noted that inflation has moved up and is still somewhat elevated. So this is not a great combination. You've got lower job growth and higher inflation, and both are in conflict with the Fed's twin goals of stable prices and full employment. So a double whammy here when it comes to the health of the economy.
Yeah, ultimately here, they have been avoiding a rate cut because of concerns over these tariffs and what it could mean to inflation and prices. But the job numbers, it appears, are so weak. They're like, okay, that's outweighing our inflation concerns. We got to lower interest rates here because ultimately it's not a case of like, we're not worried about one, we're worried about both, but now we're worried about one more than the other, at least for now. So what does this mean in terms of impact here? The Fed's rate cut, the overall FOMC rate, influences basically almost everything between bank loan rates to credit cards to car loans. Don't expect mortgage rates or car loans to plummet just yet. We have already seen mortgage rates go down a little bit here, but there are a lot of other things that factor into mortgage rates besides the FOMC overall interest rate. The biggest change will be related to credit card debt, which, by the way, is nearly half of American credit card holders. So those of you who pay interest every month, that interest will go down related to the FOMC rate. Now, we've been telling you about the drama around this meeting. Trump tried to fire one of the Fed governors, Lisa Cook, a Biden appointee. Courts ruled earlier this week that he can't fire her, so she was part of the vote here. Then, of course, there's just been the pressure Trump has been applying on the Fed here, calling Powell too late Powell. Now, when you look at these jobs numbers, Trump can make an argument here that they probably should have been lowering rates these past couple months, but they would argue that Trump is to blame for not lowering the rates because of the tariffs. They've been concerned, they've been holding off because of concerns related to the unpredictability around the economy since April 2nd, since, what did he call it, Liberation Day. Related to the tariffs here. And so this is where we're at. One of the things Fed watchers and folks across the financial world are looking at is who will replace Jay Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair. He is done in the spring. Trump would like him to go like yesterday, but he is refusing to go and quit here. And Trump hasn't found a reason to fire him. He's also worried. He'd been told that like that'll be very bad for the stock market. But ultimately here, the competition is on as to who will be the next Fed chair. So it is interesting to watch sort of how some of these folks are voting as they make a bid to be the next chair of the Federal Reserve Board.
Now to some concerning revelations about what's happening over at the CDC. On Wednesday, the recently fired CDC director, Susan Moneres, told senators that Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. pressured her to support changes to the childhood vaccine schedule before looking at any data. She was among officials arguing that RFK Jr.'s moves are endangering public health. Moneres only ran the CDC for 29 days. She was actually nominated by RFK Jr. and President Trump, but they very quickly soured on her. Wednesday was her first public appearance since the White House fired her in late August. She told the Senate's Health Committee that she was fired for, quote, holding the line on scientific integrity. She said Kennedy told her that, quote, he spoke to the president every day about changing the childhood vaccine schedule and that she needed to be on board with those coming changes in September, even without any new data to back up the decision. By the way, that decision on vaccines is expected to potentially be announced tomorrow. As we reported, Kennedy fired the entire 17-member advisory panel on immunization practices in June. Many of the members that he chose have a history of being critical of vaccines. So Kennedy has denied issuing these ultimatums. He testified before the Senate earlier this month. He said that Monarez has lied and that she is untrustworthy. But here is Senator Bill Cassidy, himself a gastroenterologist, asking Monarez about what happened, starting with Monarez here.
We got into an exchange where I had suggested that I would be open to changing childhood vaccine schedules if the evidence or science were supportive. And he responded that there was no science or evidence associated with the childhood vaccine schedule. And he elaborated that CDC had never collected the science or the data to make it available related to the safety and efficacy.
To be clear, he said there was not science or data, but that you still expected you to change the schedule.
Correct.
Now, one of RFK Jr.'s allies on the committee, Senator Rand Paul, also questioned Monarez. He was focusing on the COVID vaccines and also the Hep B vaccine. He said to Monarez, the burden is upon you and the people you wouldn't fire to prove to us that we need to give our 6-month-old a COVID vaccine and that we need to give our 1-day-old a Hep B vaccine. And Monarez responded, I actually agree with you, and I was open to the science. I just would not pre-commit to approving the changes without the science.
Yeah, that's been the big concern here for Monarez, that she's open to making changes. She just wants to see actual data, actual science before she commits to that. And so it's interesting, we mentioned she was nominated by Trump and RFK. They had great things to say about her, and then they quickly sour on her, partially because she's like, I was open to making changes here, but you need to give me actual scientific data and not just gut instinct before decisions are made. That's why we're going to be watching this advisory panel on vaccines. They have a 2-day meeting today and tomorrow. And as you said, Jill, we could get some new announcements tomorrow from them in terms of recommendations. But it all speaks to what really was the larger theme of yesterday's hearing, which is these fired or resigned CDC officials say there are no more career public health officials in the CDC director's office in the top echelons. RFK is now depending on close allies of his, as well as political appointees here, as opposed to career public health officials. By the way, that was one of RFK's goals. He didn't like anyone in that echelon and wanted them all out anyway, because he believes the CDC has not been effective these last few years. Now, we've heard from a couple dozen former CDC senior officials going back decades, and many of them acknowledge, there are some challenges within the CDC. The CDC is in need of reform, but the way you are approaching it, RFK Jr., without waiting for actual medical data before you're making some of these calls is very concerning to us and has huge ramifications. One of the other people who testified alongside Monarez yesterday was Deborah Howry. She was one of the 3 senior CDC officials who resigned in protest over Monarez being fired several weeks ago. Here's a bit of Howry's exchange with Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. Now, notably, Murkowski has been critical of Trump at times, but did end up voting for RFK Jr. There were a whole bunch of them, Republicans, that were initially against him. But then once the aforementioned Cassidy, the chair Republican doctor, decided to go for Kennedy, he might be regretting that vote now based on what he's been saying of late. The rest kind of followed through. So here is Howry in an exchange with Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, again yesterday, noting that career public health officials are meant to provide continuity and scientific expertise while working alongside political appointees.
I'm the last, or I was the last career left in the office of the director. I have no doubt that my role will be replaced by a political.
May I stop you there? You're the last career. So then are you saying that everyone that is remaining
in the office of the director is a political? Yes.
Is a political. And so there is nobody then that is, there must be somebody that is providing that career science then?
A level down, we do have center directors, although 80% are now acting because they've been fired, resigned, or retired.
So Hari goes on to say that she served under 4 presidential administrations. She said that 80% of CDC center directors, the level just below the director's office, are now in acting roles because so many career officials have been fired, resigned, or retired. And so there's acting roles put in there by RFK Jr. Under the Trump administration, about 2,400 CDC employees, nearly 1 in 5 of the staff are slated to or have already been laid off. Others have accepted early retirement buyouts as well. And back to Menares here, she said yesterday that in late August, she was directed not to speak with career scientists, but only political appointees. So effectively, RFK told her, don't talk to folks on Capitol Hill. Do not talk to any career scientists. You will only talk to my loyalists, my political appointees, folks that I have installed here. And so you had Menares say the stakes here are not theoretical when she was talking about vaccines and some of the other matters that concerned her about what was going on. You know, she mentioned that we already have the largest measles outbreak in about 30 years. 2 kids are dead. That's the measles outbreak we've been covering. It sort of is centered in West Texas, but we have seen cases in a number of states. And one of the things that came up yesterday too, Jill, from Hari, from Menares, is future pandemics. This is what they say keeps them up at night, that they don't have the right people in place anymore at the CDC and the right structures in place to handle a potential future pandemic here. And Jill, interestingly, as that was going on in Capitol Hill, we watched as this is sort of going to be the new arrangement here in America. 4 Democratic states out on the West Coast, what's called the West Coast Health Alliance, California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii. The state directors there got together and made their own recommendations when it comes to the flu vaccine and the COVID vaccine as to who should get it. They are recommending more people get it than what the CDC is saying. So you're sort of seeing this sort of like federalization of health as a number of blue states out there decide, like, we don't like what's happening in the CDC anymore. We don't trust what's happening in the CDC anymore. We're not getting transparency from the CDC anymore. So we're going to be doing our own thing. All right, Jill, there's a lot to get to in today's speed read.
Some media news from The Hollywood Reporter. ABC says it's going to take Jimmy Kimmel's popular late night show off its schedule indefinitely. It comes after one of the biggest owners of TV stations in the U.S., Nexstar Media, said that it would preempt airings of the program following remarks that Kimmel made about the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Nexstar said on Wednesday that its owned and partner television stations affiliated with the ABC television network will preempt Jimmy Kimmel Live for the foreseeable future. The company says it strongly objects to recent comments made by Kimmel concerning the killing of Charlie Kirk, and they'll replace the show with other programming.
Now, ABC and Disney did not put out a statement explaining their decision, but the sequence of events here over the last 48 hours points to political pressure on a major broadcast network by the Trump administration like we have not seen before. But first, let's play the remarks Jimmy Kimmel made in his monologue on Monday night as we go through the sequence of events here. In his monologue, he said that, quote, the MAGA gang was trying to score political points off of Kirk's murder. Let's play the full clip here. It's about a minute.
We had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the 4th stage of grief, construction.
Some people were asking Jill yesterday on Instagram, well, are you playing the whole clip? Yes, that is the entire clip here. Some people in Trump world and conservatives immediately criticizing Kimmel for the remarks, saying they were inappropriate, offensive to me, making jokes in the aftermath of Kirk's murder. And specifically, they pointed to the fact that he is mischaracterizing the impression so far we've gotten from law enforcement and from family as to the political nature or political background of the accused killer. Kimmel claiming in that clip effectively saying that the murderer is MAGA and MAGA won't accept that. When what we've learned so far is that the shooter was left-leaning in certain views, though also nihilistic, hating everyone when it came to certain views. So the joke here by Kimmel, viewed here as inappropriate by a whole bunch of folks on the right, also technically inaccurate based on the law enforcement investigation, but nothing new here in comedy. Also, the First Amendment allows you to say things that are untrue, as long as you are not actively advocating for violence. That's something we went through yesterday on yesterday's podcast, talking about what the standard is here. So the First Amendment standard is there. What is new here is that the FCC, now run by a Trump ally, Brandon Carr, immediately took aim at ABC, and ABC, which is owned by Disney, saying they will face consequences. He called for Kimmel to be taken off the air. He was vehement in a podcast interview with a conservative this week, Benny Johnson, and effectively the FCC chair saying, you need to do something about this or we'll do something about you, Disney and ABC. So what did that do? Well, that spooked some of the ownership groups that own ABC stations. The way it works, guys, with TV networks is Disney owns ABC, but ABC only owns about 8 of their stations across the country. So those are usually the biggest markets when it comes to CBS, NBC, ABC. In the ABC's case, they own the New York station, they own the LA station, they own the Chicago station, but there are more than 200 ABC stations across the country. And in most of those cases, they're owned by a whole bunch of owners out there. There could be an individual owner that owns a random ABC station somewhere. There could be ownership groups. Nexstar, who you mentioned above, owns a couple dozen ABC stations. They're one of the largest owners of ABC stations. And in fact, they want to get bigger. They have a $6 billion acquisition coming up of another station group called Tegna, which owns even more stations. Well, it turns out when you have a major media acquisition, you need FCC approval. So business is really behind this whole thing because Nexstar is going to need FCC approval. Who does that? Who helps with that? Brandon Carr, Trump's ally, who is calling for ramifications here. He's going to need to approve or allow that merger to go through. So the suspicion here is that Nexstar, by moving first here with their 24 ABC stations, saying, oh, we can't air Kimmel on our stations, we're offended by this, effectively started the dominoes here because they make that move. That then leads to a debate at Disney headquarters. According to reporting by Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg last night, executives Bob Iger and Dana Walden say, maybe we need to pull Jimmy Kimmel off the air. Nexstar made this move. We're very concerned about what the Trump administration may do to us, what the retribution may be. Remember, Disney is a very large business, and it needs a lot of things from the government. So they made the call, preemptively it appears, on Wednesday to pull Jimmy off the air. Unclear again for how long and what happens next. But someone celebrating that move last night was none other than President Trump. He took to social media saying, this is great news from America. Kimmel's show is canceled. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage. Kimmel has zero talent. He then goes on to say, Trump says, with Colbert now gone at CBS and Kimmel now gone, that leaves Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers at NBC, 2 total losers on fake news NBC. Do it, NBC. Effectively saying there that he's not calling on NBC to cancel the 2 comedians who are also very critical of Trump. Remember, Jimmy Kimmel has been critical of Trump here for more than a decade. He goes at him every single night. So Trump harbors no love for Jimmy Kimmel. And they saw an opportunity here to try to pressure ABC and parent company Disney to make this move. We'll wait more here from Disney explaining why exactly they did this. Because again, when we run the gamut of comments recently by various media folks through the years, on the scale of things, you could argue that ABC might need to make him apologize for those remarks if they offended anybody, but ultimately to pull the entire show off the air, a pretty dramatic move here. And it's interesting, Jill, because we're hearing from conservatives in the Mo News audience who liked Kirk, who don't like Jimmy Kimmel, who don't like those remarks. They found them inappropriate. But I have now gotten a couple dozen remarks from conservatives in the Mo News audience who are like, he should not be pulled off the air for saying the killer was MAGA. At most, an apology here. So we'll see what the fallout is here. We're certainly seeing outrage in political circles and media circles about this, but you're seeing celebration on the right. You know, you get the sense that conservatives got a taste of cancel culture in recent years on their end from liberals, and there are some that are loving the retribution that is happening now against folks on the left. Though the Trump administration pushes back, saying this is not cancel culture. This is someone dealing with ramifications for their words. though that's also what you would hear from the left over the years when the term cancel culture was thrown out. And it was liberals saying, no, this is someone dealing with ramifications for their words or actions through the years. So trying to draw a distinction there, you're seeing people do it. It is a challenging distinction to make. Nonetheless, as we look ahead to see what happens here, there's another station group, a company called Sinclair, that's very conservative. They own a couple dozen ABC stations like Nexstar does. And they're saying, we will not allow Jimmy Kimmel on the air until he apologizes and he makes a donation to the Kirk family. And he makes a donation to Kirk's conservative activist group, Turning Point USA. So all these groups one-upping each other against Sinclair has some very conservative owners. And so it looks like they're ingratiating themselves to the FCC as well as we talk about all the actors here. So quite a development in the media world. There was the Colbert development. More than a month ago, we told you about the cancellation of Colbert. CBS put that out as a business decision, though it did come as their parent company, Paramount, was looking for FCC approval for a major merger. And now you have this situation unfolding with yet another late night show. We'll keep you up to date all day over at Mo News Instagram.
This from the BBC. King Charles III welcomed President Trump to his second state visit to the United Kingdom on Wednesday with a ton of pomp and circumstance. Trump is the first modern world leader to be invited for a second state visit to the UK. Typically, selected foreign leaders are only treated to one. Trump and First Lady Melania Trump flew from London to Windsor Castle on Marine One. They were greeted by the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, before walking to meet the King and Queen Camilla. The royal pageantry consisted of horse-drawn carriages, mounted troops, and multiple renditions of the U.S. national anthem. Around 1,300 British troops were involved in the ceremonial welcome, which is the largest guard of honor in recent history for a visiting foreign leader. Official gifts were exchanged. President Trump was given a leather volume celebrating the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Declaration of Independence and the flag that was flying over Buckingham Palace on the day of his inauguration in January of this year.
Jill, there was also a very ornate state dinner last night at Windsor Castle. We posted a lot of photos over on Instagram of the setup there. You also had some CEOs like the head of NVIDIA. You had Tim Cook of Apple alongside the leaders. President Trump last night sitting in between King Charles and Princess Catherine. And then across from them, Prince William, Melania Trump, and Queen Camilla. There was a whole seating arrangement. There was a whole to-do. They gave toasts to one another. President Trump saying his second state visit here, one of the highest honors of his life. And he said, don't let any other president do two state visits. I want to keep this record for myself. They both highlighted the long history, the special relationship, special friendship between the U.S. and the U.K. King Charles in his toast made a point of commending Trump's efforts at world peace and his efforts in Ukraine. So there's a lot of cheersing, a lot of mutual praise going on. These visits are meant for what's called soft power diplomacy, a royal charm offensive happening here. Because remember, the U.S. imposed tariffs on the U.K. On aluminum and on overall exports from the U.K. to the U.S. Now, the U.K. has lower tariffs than the EU and a whole number of other countries around the world. But certainly the U.K. here, their angle of approach is maybe we can butter them up with the horses and the carriage and the anthems and the meal. And maybe we'll get a better deal when the negotiations happen. Sitting close to Trump last night were both Secretary of State Rubio and Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent. Now, we should note not everyone was happy about Trump's visit there. There were thousands of protesters in London who gathered on Wednesday to protest the visit. And then somehow protesters managed to find a way to project photos of Trump and Jeffrey Epstein onto Windsor Castle on Tuesday night for a bit.
Back to the soft diplomacy, Moshe. We do know if there's one thing President Trump loves, it is that pomp and circumstance. It's the red carpet being rolled out for him. There were reports that Melania Trump, who has shied away from some aspects of the role of being First Lady, there's reporting that she was really excited about this and planning her outfits. So this is something that the Trumps enjoy.
Oh, very much. You know, if you recall, when Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, came, he was one of the first world leaders to come to the Oval Office. He made a point of surprising Trump with this invitation from the King for another state visit. Again, very unprecedented that they're giving a world leader 2 official state visits with all the to-dos and the welcome and all the pageantry of the royal family. And they made a point of all these like special touches last night. Like we posted the menu that they had for the dinner. And like for the after dinner drink, they had a 1945 vintage port honoring Trump as the 45th president. They had a Hennessy Cognac Grand Champagne from 1912, which is the year of Trump's mother's birth. They had a special champagne that was apparently Churchill's favorite because Trump loves Churchill. So, well, interestingly, Trump doesn't drink and has never drank, according to him, because his older brother was an alcoholic who died at a very young age. So they noted in the list of drinks that there were also soft drinks available for President Trump. Well, the rest, I guess, had glasses of wine. But again, they made a special point in kind of picking these like very Trump-specific wines and touches here, because again, there are negotiations happening, and they know that, you know, part of the ceremony here is a way to engender goodwill with President Trump.
And in some related news, this from Newsday, an air traffic controller told a Spirit Airlines pilot to pay attention while flying near Air Force One on Tuesday morning. This is according to captured audio recording. The incident happened over Long Island while President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump were en route to the UK. That Spirit plane was flying from Fort Lauderdale to Boston. So don't blame Long Island, Moshe. They were just flying over us.
It just happened to be over Long
It's
Island.
a coincidence.
Well, so I'll take a listen here to the audio. This is the air traffic controller speaking to the pilot. And when I say speaking to the pilot, yelling at the pilot to like start moving.
Spirit wings 1300, turn 20 degrees right immediately. Spirit 1300, traffic's off your left wing by 8 miles, 747. I'm sure you can see who it is. Pay attention. Get off the iPad.
So you might have caught there the air traffic controller yelling at the pilot, get off your iPad. Like, make moves here. Now, the FAA did say in a social media post that it was aware of the incident, but the 2 planes did stay the required distance apart. But you certainly, there is an extra level of concern whenever Air Force One is in the air. The air traffic controllers are making sure commercial traffic isn't creating any potential risks.
An international story we're watching from the Washington Post. In Afghanistan, the Taliban banned access to Wi-Fi to at least one province, effectively cutting off communication for thousands in northern Afghanistan. And it was a surprise to local government workers. A Taliban spokesperson wrote on X that the Wi-Fi access was cut, quote, for the prevention of vices. There are also reports that the Wi-Fi ban could be expanded to other parts of the country and potentially become nationwide.
A reminder that last month actually marked 4 years since the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, and then you had the Taliban taking over shortly thereafter. After the Taliban got back into power, they announced a whole bunch of new restrictions, sort of a throwback to when they ran the country last in the 90s and early 2000s, pre-9/11. That included a ban on women's education after 6th grade. That leads Afghan women to rely on the internet for education, since many of them don't have access to their classes or coursework right now. So a lot of concern that this is just the latest attempt by the Taliban here to curtail women's rights and the ability for women to get some semblance of an education inside Afghanistan. One nonprofit that supports online education tells the Washington Post that about a quarter of their students were impacted by the Wi-Fi ban here, with few means to resolve it, sadly.
Moshe, I remember when the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan and the Taliban took over, they were trying to say, oh, this is Taliban 2.0. This is a more friendly, Western-friendly Taliban, but it is looking more and more, unfortunately, like Taliban 2.0 is the same as Taliban 1.0.
Yeah, very sadly for the women of Afghanistan, especially a younger generation, Jill, you have a significant amount of the population is under the age of 18 there who only knew the freedoms of the past 20 years, albeit Afghanistan is still a very poor country and had a whole bunch of issues these past 2 decades. But many of them never remember that era of the 90s. They're too young to remember it. And so they grew up with a sense that they could have jobs like be doctors and be teachers and be scientists. Only to then see that the Taliban had other plans for them.
From the Wall Street Journal, America is in the middle of a cocaine resurgence. The drug is cheaper and purer than it has been in years. Usage is up 154% in the western part of the United States. That's since 2019. And 19% in the eastern part of the U.S., according to Millennium Health. At the same time, CDC data shows that fentanyl use has started to decline, which makes cocaine the, quote, cleaner choice in the eyes of new users, and it has less stigma. So that is one of the reasons that we are seeing an increase. There's also more supply. Colombian labs are producing unprecedented amounts of cocaine. Shipments leave Ecuador on 3-week voyages by small fishing crews and narco subs. They refuel near the Galapagos, and then they head to Mexico's Pacific coast. And like anything, the drug market is supply and demand. So the glut has driven U.S. street prices down nearly half. I have never bought cocaine, Moshe, but apparently this is pretty cheap, $60 to $75 a gram for pure cocaine.
Yeah, it's interesting here, Jill. So the 80s are back in terms of the cocaine surge that the experts have been seeing here. And there are a few reasons for this. One is the cartel wars and which cartel is now surging. Apparently that's the Jalisco cartel. After the fentanyl crackdown, the Trump administration took a really hard line on fentanyl that crippled a competing cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, which led to an opening here for the Jalisco cartel. So Sinaloa was focused on fentanyl. Jalisco here, a transnational force that's been seizing ports, seizing trafficking routes for their cocaine trade. Jill, sticking with cartels here, apparently an alliance of a couple cartels has also led to this opening for cocaine. I mentioned, of course, the Trump administration's cracking down on fentanyl has really hurt the Sinaloa cartel. Well, Jalisco decided to strike alliance with another cartel, the Sons of El Chapo Guzman. Remember, El Chapo Guzman goes to prison. They call the Sons the Chapitos. And so apparently they've struck an alliance here that has given Jalisco more access to take their cocaine and meth into the U.S., while the Chapitos themselves have found a way to themselves get into the fentanyl trade. And all of this is happening while, well, what do we focus on here at home? Sure, there is the drug war, but they've taken a whole bunch of federal agents off of drug interdiction duties and put them on immigration duties because the priority for the White House has been deportations. So now there are fewer agents to try to cut off the amount of drugs coming into the country. And so that has created an opening here for the Jalisco cartel and the cocaine trade. Jill, you mentioned earlier, too, the surge in the western half of the U.S. That's partially because a lot of the cocaine is moving through the Pacific in these drug subs. So while we've been reporting these high-profile military interventions where the U.S. military has been blowing up these speedboats in the Caribbean, ultimately, they're not out there in the Pacific. The Pacific's much more difficult to man out there, and that's where the cocaine is coming up. And so you see the steady flow going in. So it's a bit cartels. It's also because we are now focused, for the most part, on deportations and immigration. And again, while all this attention is being spent on the Venezuelan Tren de Aragua in the Caribbean, the other groups and cartels are using the Pacific route to bring up the cocaine.
And finally, from Variety, the Summer I Turned Pretty story, not over just yet. Amazon Prime Video has officially greenlit a feature film that will conclude the story of that hit series. The exact plot details are still under wraps, aside from the fact that it will continue the story of the series, which just aired the finale for its third and final season.
The movie will be written by Jenny Han, who wrote the books on which the show was based and developed for television. According to Amazon, the season 3 debut of the series drew 25 million viewers globally within 7 days of launch. Jill, I don't know if those are individual viewers or total views, because like you alone account for what, like 1 million of the 25 million views?
Yes, there are people like me that rewatch the episodes.
There's 25 of you watching it each 1 million times.
On repeat.
All right, we end here with On This Day in History. On this day in 1793, President George Washington, laid the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol. Now, the Capitol would actually take a century to complete. It wasn't done until the late 1800s as architects came and went. And then, of course, there was our friends. Well, they weren't friends back then, but the British set fire to it during the War of 1812. A rainstorm actually saved the building from total destruction, but that meant that the construction would then have to basically reset. They were still building parts of it during the Lincoln administration, during the Civil War, but eventually they would finish that U.S. Capitol about 100 years after Washington laid the cornerstone. On this day in 2001, letters containing anthrax were mailed from Princeton, New Jersey to ABC News, CBS News, NBC News, the New York Post, among the organizations that received envelopes full of anthrax. This was just in the aftermath, Jill, of 9/11. 22 people were exposed to anthrax. 5 were killed. I remember being an intern on Capitol Hill that semester, the fall of 2001, when I was just a sophomore GW student. It was the semester of 9/11. We were already freaked out about a week after the attacks. And then one of the roles of the interns was to open up the mail amid these anthrax attacks. Several of the envelopes showed up on Capitol Hill. So a whole bunch of us interns were taken to the medical offices on Capitol Hill and were given Cipro, which was a drug to deal with potential anthrax exposure. Now, they would end up conducting a multi-year investigation. Finally, in 2008, federal officials believe they zeroed in on the person who was responsible for those anthrax envelopes. His name was Bruce Ivins. He was a microbiologist for the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute. But as they were focused in on him, he died by suicide. So while the Justice Department said, okay, we got the guy and then he took his own life, we were never able to put him on trial, case closed, there are people who still wonder whether it was somebody else and not Ivins.
Moshe, I was recently thinking about the whole anthrax situation and how it was shortly after September 11th, because I know so many other Americans are feeling pretty down about the state of U.S. politics right now and just the state of this country. And I was thinking about that moment in time and how it really seemed like things were so out of control. And then it kind of got reined back in. So hopefully things will calm down now also.
There was no social media back then, Jill. We were able to recover from 9/11
and unite.
ruin this
for me,
well,
Moshe.
I'm just saying.
No, but you're
that,
right.
Like,
you're
can
right.
you imagine the anthrax attacks in 9/11 and like look at the insane theories around Charlie Kirk and everything else. Now, like back then, without social media, like maybe some people had crazy theories, but they weren't just putting it up on social media and being like, "Oh, just asking questions." Have you been asking those questions? Like, sure, I could ask lots of questions. Show me evidence. Anyway, I only say that because like I'm getting all these direct messages on Instagram being like, do you think it's weird that blah, blah, blah? Do you think blah, blah? And I'm like, guys, I cannot deal with theories. I need facts. If you have a theory, an alternate theory to what is going on out there, please provide me with actual information and evidence of said theory. So I do think that there was like an opportunity back then to actually like move on from things because the crazies weren't managing the conversation. Okay. We end here with a bit of pop culture news. On this day in 1964,
You don't even need to do the whole thing.
No, you just have to do. The Addams Family TV show premiered on this day, airing for 2 seasons, only 2 seasons on ABC. And on this day in 1968, Funny Girl, the movie starring Barbra Streisand and Omar Sharif, opened at the Criterion Theater in New York. It was Streisand's first premiere as a new movie star. Jill, some iconic songs from Funny Girl.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. The reviews really help.
Appreciate all of you. See you back here tomorrow for a special Friday edition of the podcast.
Thank you. Listen to Mo News, the app.